Lack of awareness from Mo Salah. If you look at the drop-off in his standards, he has been as big a factor, if not the biggest factor, in Liverpool's decline and their pitiful defence of the title.
He's certainly not going quietly. Do you think that he has done himself an injustice by leaving in this manner?
Yeah, I do. If you're going to leave a football club, do it like Andy Robertson, don't do it like Mo Salah. And I think the sentiment of the statement is poor. You know, it's not a thinly veiled swipe at his manager. It's a public condemnation.
I don't know what you do if you're on the stocks. If you don't play him, you're basically denying a legend a big goodbye and therefore undermining your relationship with the supporters even further. If you do play him, he's undermined your authority and you're giving in to him. So it's a very difficult situation for Arne Slot.
A clear attempt to undermine Arne Slot and to further fracture what is already a very frosty relationship with the Liverpool supporters. But if he doesn't play him and give him that Anfield farewell, any fans that are still with Arne Slot are very quickly going to join those dissenting voices. So I don't envy the position that Mo Salah has put him in at the manager, and I actually think Arne Slot will keep his dignity. He'll bat the questions away in his press conference, and he will give Mo Salah that farewell that probably, with what he's done to the manager, he doesn't deserve.
He seems to have a bit of support in the dressing room. I'm looking at the people that liked it, commented on it. You know, it doesn't bode well, does it, going forward for Arne Slot?
Certainly when it comes to supporters, and seemingly, as you say, a big contingent in that dressing room, he isn't Mr. Popular, is he? So it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out.
Sunday was a bit of a day, wasn't it? We recorded later than scheduled, so Crook could have what I thought was going to be his traditional roast dinner, but instead he's had a Chinese and a couple of glasses of wine. You're calling it a cheat day, are you?
Well, you know, I've been on this health regime. I've stuck to it really well. But yeah, tonight I fancied falling off the wagon. I'll be back on it tomorrow.
Oh, no, yeah, you're looking good, fella. Unlike West Ham United, who I thought were absolutely shocking on Sunday afternoon. A lack of intensity, which has put them in massive trouble. They're going to need a miracle now to get out of that trouble. They want to be starting something, but they were bad. And Willa Sulo's smooth, but defending criminal, they are going to find themselves crossing their fingers, their toes and everything else in order to stay in the Premier League. Crookmeister, what is your big takeaway from the Premier League weekend?
Oof. See, I want to say something optimistic, but I'm feeling a little bit concerned about the last day of the season turning into a damp squib, because Arsenal are going to beat Burnley on Monday. I don't think City will beat Bournemouth the following night, so the title race will be done. That won't go to the last day. I can see a scenario now where Tottenham pick up a point against Chelsea, and that'll be enough because the goal difference, that the relegation battle effectively will be over before the last day. So we could have a last day of the season when we're talking about whether Bournemouth or Brighton get a European place or not. And that just feels like, after the season we've had of so many twists and turns and so much drama, not the way that we would have seen it ending.
Surely it's not going to end like that. Surely it's not. If it does, by the way, should we just nick off to Gabby's place in the Algarve?
Yeah, I think it's a good shout, to be honest.
We've also got the Championship playoff final to do on Saturday, which
well, that might not even take place.
Hello, Gabs. Yeah, we'll be there Friday. Okay, lots to get into then from the weekend, because there has been quite a lot of talking points. We've got handball to talk about again. We've got not turning up for a big game to talk about again. We've got the opportunity to hear from Bruno Fernandes. Congratulations to him for equaling the Premier League record for assists in one season. We'll preview some of the midweek action that Crook's already touched on. And of course, we'll look back on the 145th FA Cup final. Yeah, let's start with the FA Cup final. It was won by Manchester City. Congratulations to Pep Guardiola on what he says is a 20th trophy in his time at Manchester City. If we're counting Community Shields, are we counting Community Shields, Crook? Are we lumbering those in with the rest of them?
Well, it sounds good, doesn't it? 20 trophies in 10 years. It's a nice round number. Works out to a season. Even I can do that without a calculator. But yeah, I'm not sure Community Shields are really major pieces of silver.
That's Super Cups, Community Shields and Club World Cups before it was actually a real tournament.
Oh, no, we took the Club World Cup because United won that. That's a proper trophy.
Oh, right, okay. It's funny how we can categorise these things by what our own clubs do. We'll get into the cup final. We'll talk about Pep and his future in just a moment. But the big story on Sunday is the appointment of Xabi Alonso as the new Chelsea manager. And Crook Blueco are changing tack.
They are. And I think when we first reported Xabi Alonso, I remember being in the studio actually with Jim and Simon when I broke the news that Chelsea had reached out to his advisor. It wasn't a particularly difficult call to make because he also represents Andoni Iraola and they'd already spoken to him. But Simon and Jim were quite surprised by that direction of travel because it is so far removed from certainly the last couple of appointments that Chelsea have made in Enzo Maresca and Liam Rossignol. They were both head coaches. I think Graham Potter was a head coach, wasn't he? And so was Mauricio Pochettino. So the fact they've given him the title manager backs up what we're hearing from our sources at Stamford Bridge, that they are going to give him more power, more say when it comes to transfers. So he's still going to have to be part of this big transfer committee. They've got 5 sporting directors. Obviously, Egbali has his say as well, Todd Bowley to a lesser extent. But what I think we're seeing in Xabi Alonso is someone who is going to come in and command the respect of the dressing room in a way that I think Maresca did by the end. I think those Chelsea players were sad to see him go, but Liam Rossignol certainly didn't. And they see him as someone who can come in and build a culture. That's why they're giving him a 4-year contract. And that, as you say, is an admission that the way they have been operating has not necessarily been the right way.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear from Reece James after the cup final on Saturday. I know you were down in the tunnel when he was speaking. And he said, if there's one thing that the Chelsea players want going forward to next season, it's stability. And the fact that they've brought in someone with a good CV, someone with a great pedigree, a man who's won the World Cup, won all the big honours that needs to be won and played club football at the highest level, but also managed a team like Bayer Leverkusen, who were called Bayer Neverkusen, by the way, in Germany, because they never won anything. Then they went through a season unbeaten and won everything. So, look, fair play to him for that. He's obviously got a track record. I think we'll scrub the Real Madrid thing from the CV because it was just an unmanageable situation. But I think the fact that they've gone down this route sort of shows that they are admitting they got stuff wrong, which I quite like, because they did say they were going to have a period of self-reflection. And the fact that it feels like they've done that, I think makes this appointment feel a little bit more optimistic. I'm very pleased with it. I think Chelsea fans are happy with it. And I hope that it's the beginning of a change. 2 key things have sort of come out from our sources at Stamford Bridge over the last sort of 24 hours. And the one thing that really got me was the influence that he's going to have on the transfers. You just sort of mentioned it. But really, it was the restatement that Chelsea are going to compete for trophies. The fact of the matter is that Chelsea have to be a club that competes for trophies. I'm not demanding that Chelsea win the Champions League or the Premier League every year, but they've got to be a team that competes for trophies. And I think they lost sight of that this season. Yes, they've just been in the FA Cup final. And if you really want to be picky, you can say, yeah, but they got to the FA Cup final and they played quite well for a certain number of minutes in that game. Yes, all of that is true. But it doesn't feel like to me that this is a team that really believed that they were going to end the season with silverware. And I think that's got to be something that is very much part of what Chelsea do. When you hear from Bruno Fernandes later, we talked about trophies, and he said, it's not Michael Carrick's vision, it's not my vision, it is Manchester United's DNA to win and compete for trophies. And it's been too long since we won the Premier League. It's been too long since we competed for the Champions League. And that's a situation that Chelsea can't afford to get into, mainly because, unlike Manchester United, they don't have a massive stadium, a wonderful corporate arm, and this brilliant cash machine outside the front of the store that just basically gives them license to print money. They have to win to get more people through the door. I think the influence of Xabi Alonso on the recruitment is really interesting. The fact that it's going to be a collaborative process, I think we all knew that was going to be the case. The sporting directors, the ownership will be involved in that. But there seems to be strong alignment, that word has come out again, between the squad development and the type of players that are going to be needed to knock Chelsea on. I hope that means we're going to get some experienced players. I just wonder how much money they've got to play with.
Well, obviously missing out on Champions League football is going to hamper them. I know you're still a little bit optimistic actually that they could gate crash their way in by winning.
It's not official yet.
Not
official yet.
But that would make a massive difference. I'm not sure that getting a Conference League place is going to be hugely beneficial to the budget. And I think that you're going to see players moved on. You know, I looked at Liam Delap in that FA Cup final. We'll break that down in more detail. But the header that he spooned over the crossbar sort of sums up his Chelsea career and why they're open to offers for him. It's not worked out. They took a punt because the release clause was so low. Not sure Jamie Gittins has got a massive future at the football club. We've already reported they're open to offers for Garnacho. Wesley Fofana, I think, is someone else they could move on. So I think there's going to be quite a big churn of players this summer, and it might be a case of Chelsea having to sell to buy.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about the final itself. It was tense, it was tight. Ultimately, City had the greater options off the bench for me and had that little bit of extra quality in the final third that Chelsea lacked. You mentioned the Delap situation. I thought João Pedro got himself into a couple of really good positions but couldn't make them pay. I think it helped for Manchester City that they did have great options off the bench, including Ryan Cherki, and that changed the game, really. I think when they made their alterations, Manchester City got that little bit better. Chelsea's changes that they were almost forced into hindered theirs.
Yeah, and actually it's gone a bit under the radar because ultimately City have won the FA Cup and, broken that hoodoo of losing their last 2 FA Cup finals. But he got the team selection wrong again, Pep Guardiola. He overthought it again for a major final. You mentioned it in commentary that effectively it was a 4-2-4 in that first half with Mamouche and Haaland the front two, and then obviously Semenyo on one wing, Doku on the other. I thought Chelsea did a really good job of negating his obvious threat, but maybe that was to the detriment of their own attacking capability. But it was only really when Guardiola made that change, took off Mamouche, brought on Rayan Cherki, those spaces started to open up. So it's once again a cup final where he's not picked the right team, but ultimately on this occasion, unlike in 2021 when Chelsea last beat them in that Champions League final, he's got away with it really. But from a Chelsea perspective, and I did a big article on this on the talkSPORT website on Saturday night on my way home, I think it laid bare that the challenges that Xabi Alonso has got, the fact that they've only really got João Pedro to rely upon up front and he needs a bit of support. The fact that Levi Colwill got through the game, did pretty well up against Erling Haaland, though obviously Haaland has played a part in the winner, but he needs an experienced partner alongside him, as you've alluded to. Sanchez didn't do anything wrong, but I think we all know that long-term they need a stronger number one. And Pep had the options off the bench, in Cherki and even Kovacic to a lesser extent, who's not played much football this season, but is a big game player. And when Chelsea are throwing on Liam Delap and Alejandro Garnacho, that for me doesn't smack of a team who are genuine contenders for the biggest prizes.
It felt inferior, didn't it, when Chelsea...
The whole setup felt inferior. When you pick a team with 6 defenders, and a lot's been made of Callum McFarlane, and again, I alluded to this in my article, he's turned up for a cup final in his tracksuit. He stands arms folded during the national anthems, like he's a little bit overawed by the occasion. And he probably is. This is a guy who's managed a handful of games, and all of a sudden, he's leading
that was
a team
game number
out
6.
in an FA Cup final.
It was Pep Guardiola's 1,042nd.
Yeah, but he should have put a suit on for an FA Cup final.
Yeah,
he might never get the chance to lead a team out of Wembley again.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I was a little bit disappointed. And I know that Scott sort of made light of it and said that they don't really do that anymore, but the players turning up in tracksuits as well. I just think it's FA Cup final today. I wore a blazer. You wore a blazer. Everybody in our team looked smart because we had a bit of reverence. I looked at the TNT commentary team, Fletch and Ali and Stephen Gerrard, all in their suits because it's the FA Cup final and you've got to sort of take it seriously. If you dress for the occasion, you live up to the occasion, you build it up in your mind. I know people will say, oh, that's silly or whatever, but sometimes it does just elevate it in your minds. This is a really, really important game. Look, Chelsea weren't that bad, but they weren't good enough to win the game, unlike the goal that did win the game. And when I came back actually last night, I was very quick to get back from Wembley to Manchester. I did it in really good time. There was nothing on the roads. And I actually stopped off at our favourite Chinese, the one in Didsbury. I popped in there, picked up our regular takeaway for 2, but I just had it for myself, sat down, watched a bit of Eurovision, and then watched the game back. And I still can't get over how good the goal was. The goal was off the scale, right? It's one of the great FA Cup final goals. And I said that at the time, and I believe it because of the sort of cheekiness to try that at that moment when you haven't really had a major incident in the game where the goalkeeper, Robert Sanchez, has had to make a proper save up until that point. The fact that Erling Haaland fizzes that ball across and Semenyo thinks with it a little bit behind him, he's going to flick it. I thought it was terrific. He has been involved in more FA Cup goals this season than any other Manchester City player. 5 involvements, 3 goals, 2 assists, and he was the first Ghanaian player ever to score an FA Cup final. So congratulations to him for that. But where do you think the goal ranks in some of the best that we've seen at Wembley in FA Cup finals?
Do you know what? Stuart Pearce and I were discussing this pitch side in between ad breaks. And we were saying, actually, when it comes to great FA Cup final goals, there aren't a bucket full, are they? I mean, Ricky Villa is one that obviously stands out from a long time ago. Stuart himself, with that free kick that he scored, that ultimately didn't end in glory. I mean, for me, the second goal that Manchester United scored against City was a thing of beauty, but it was a team goal as opposed to a moment of individual brilliance. So I think the Semenyo goal is right up there, and it couldn't happen to a nicer, more dedicated professional. You look at the way that he handled his departure from Bournemouth, didn't down tools. I mentioned at the time he'd been on one booking away from a suspension for a while. The easy thing to do would have been to pick up a yellow card and then say, you know what, I'm going to protect myself. I don't need to play for Bournemouth. He didn't. He scored with his last kick for the Cherries in what could yet be a goal that helps them qualify for Europe. Turns up at Manchester City, hits the ground running, and there weren't many players on the pitch who would have been able to do that. So credit to him. But yeah, probably Ricky Villa still the standout one for me.
Yeah, I was thinking Tielemans against Chelsea, the winner. The fact that it was a winner, it was a long-range hit. I think long-range hits always sort of get the
Stadium,
headlines.
though, takes a bit of the gloss off that. I know it wasn't anybody's fault at the time, but...
Yeah. Roberto Di Matteo against Middlesbrough after 43 seconds, a hit from about 30 yards is absolutely superb, by the way. That's a cracking goal. What else am I thinking of when I think of FA Cup final? Actually, Ray Parlour scored a brilliant FA Cup final goal against Chelsea in 2002.
Yeah, I mentioned that one to Piercy, actually. That was from a
not
mile
Wembley,
out
though.
well,
Not Wembley. That was at Cardiff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not that should take the shine off it, but it was a brilliant goal. But in terms of just that moment of magic, that was like a little bit like you said Lee Sharp against Barcelona, didn't you? I was thinking it was a little bit like Gianfranco Zola against Norwich City.
Yes, I remember that one. Yeah, very similar, actually. The reason the Lee Sharp one sprung to mind was because
You're a massive United fan and you have to get him into every conversation.
I saw a video of it this week, actually, funnily enough. And it was similar. Although I think actually Semenyo's was probably an even more difficult finish than Sharp.
It was really, really good. And I tell you what, I did say it at the time and I meant it, that sometimes when you score a goal like that, you just deserve to win the cup final with it. And I think that was probably true. So much will change in the Premier League over the course of the summer months. United making a change manager. We'll get onto those in just a second. Possibly Liverpool. We'll get into that again in the next few moments as well. Spurs have just changed their boss. Of course, Roberto De Zerbi is in there for the long haul. New guy in at Chelsea announced on Sunday morning. New Palace manager is just around the corner. New Bournemouth manager Marco Rosa will start in July. It is going to look a very different Premier League next season, especially if Pep Guardiola leaves. Did you speak to him after the game? Because not everyone did.
I did, actually. I did. And do you know what? He was, as you were describing the build-up, he was so relaxed for the first part of the interview and giving, by his standards, quite expansive answers. And I was trying to think of a clever way to ask if he was leaving without being so blunt as to ask if he was leaving and then getting a short reply. So I said to him, we all know how much you love the FA Cup. You've won it 3 times now and obviously a couple of runners-up medals as well. Will you be back in January to start your defence of the FA Cup? And he said, yes, the club are going to play in the FA Cup. And I said, well, what about you personally? And with that, he walked off and headed back to the dressing room.
Well, I think me and you are of the opinion that he will be walking off in the summer. And we have been for a while, and we've sort of maintained that. I know that it's wavered a little bit, but I just the way he talks, spending time with him, his attitude towards us, the way he's sort of being very playful, he's very relaxed, as you've already mentioned, and I've said that to you a few times when I've been in the tunnel with him. In fact, they grabbed me by my shirt the other night and said, "Did you say I was arrogant when I made all the changes?" I was like, "No, I didn't. I promise you." But like just messing around and having fun, it's almost a little bit like he's a bit D-mob happy, really.
Yeah.
So I wonder, and he said, by the way, he can still walk away with a treble. There's every chance that still happens. I know, like, obviously, it means that Arsenal got to slip up somewhere. But after what Oliver Glasner told you
Mm.
on Sunday, there's a chance. Just remind the listeners, people who might not have heard this, because I'm not sure it's gone out yet, but you tell them what Glasner told you.
We basically asked if he was going to rest players against Arsenal next Sunday, obviously a few days before they go off to Germany to play that Conference League final, and he said no. I will manage minutes, much like I've been doing in recent weeks anyway, and he did take off Jeremy Pino at half-time in that game at Brentford, brought on Brennan Johnson. Mateta was only used sparingly towards the end. Chris Richards came on, actually picked up an injury that he was quite concerned about, which could be a blow for Palace. But he said, I've considered all the options available, including whether to play the under-21s. He actually said that. But he said, last time I played the kids was in the Conference League phase against Coups. We ended up in a last 16 tie that maybe we could have done without. And more importantly, we went to Leeds the following weekend and we got absolutely hammered. And he said, I don't want to go into a cup final on the back of that. I want to try and build some momentum. So I think it will be maybe a stronger Palace team next Sunday than maybe Arsenal would have expected. And for an hour against Brentford, they were really good, Palace. You know, they took the lead early for a penalty. They hit the woodwork twice. And it was only really in the final half an hour when he started to make changes that the Brentford got a foothold in the game. So yeah, maybe Arsenal could be a little bit concerned about their trip to Selhurst Park. But whatever team he sends out, the players are going to manage themselves, aren't they? They're not going to go full throttle and risk missing the final.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, all the finals, the Conference League final, I'll be there in Leipzig. The Europa League final, Jim Proudfoot's already started his journey to Istanbul. Adrian Durham is heading to that one as well. Gabriel Bonahor, Andy Townsend. And Budapest, with Champions League final, I know that the boys are getting ready to go to that one as well. It's going to be absolutely massive couple of weeks. They've got the Championship playoff final. Crook and I are doing that one for talkSPORT, if indeed it goes ahead. Right, let's talk about another a group of players that are soaring. They're not the Eagles, but boy, haven't they taken off under Michael Carrick? Well, after finishing third, or basically guaranteed that they're finishing third anyway, Manchester United could have been taking it easy. But they didn't, and nor did Nottingham Forest, actually, in what was a thrilling game at Old Trafford on Sunday lunchtime. It was brilliant, great fun. And it was great being in the tunnel afterwards, talking to Vitor Pereira, Michael Carrick, and Bruno Fernandes. You'll hear that interview very shortly about the whole game, the whole season, and what could happen next. Michael Carrick has waited longer to become Manchester United's permanent boss than HS2's been waiting to reach Birmingham. How much longer is it going to be before they announce him? Well, I tried to get him to tell us on Sunday.
He certainly did.
He didn't. But what do we understand?
Well, I think the basic premise of the contract is agreed. 2 years initially with a year's option on the end of it. I think maybe there's still a little bit of discussion about backroom staff. Perhaps Michael Carrick wants to add to that backroom team. Obviously, he's working with quite a small group. Johnny Evans, his former teammate, Jonathan Woodgate, who does a lot of the defensive coaching, and Steve Holland, who's been a revelation. But I do think it'll be announced imminently. I know he said to you, we should get news this week. I would expect in the next 24, 48 hours that gets ratified. I think, like you said before the commentary, it's a bit disappointing in one respect that they didn't just get it over the line before the game. He obviously gave the speech on the pitch at the end, as a lot of Manchester United managers do after the final home game of the season. Not all, but most of them. And it would have been nice if he was able to say to the crowd, and they all stayed, didn't they? It was a packed stadium.
Absolutely.
As the players went on that lap of appreciation. If he could say, I'll see you all next season, but he couldn't quite do that because he's not quite sorted yet.
Yeah, he said, hopefully, he talked about the memories and the nights that they'd had there since he'd been in charge. He said, hopefully, there's a lot more, and everyone burst into applause and stuff like that. But he never sort of said, I will be back. So when I saw him in the tunnel, I said to him, rather cheekily, and I know, if I was to say to you, will you be the manager of Manchester United in August, would you reply with the word, hopefully? And he said, are you trying to put words in my mouth? And I went, I am a little bit, actually, yeah.
It was a good interview. He keeps that poker face so well, doesn't he? He gave similar replies in his press conference pre and post match. But listen, he's going to be sticking around. It's the right decision to finish third from where they were when he came in. I know if you're not a Carrick fan, you say, well, they were sixth anyway. They could have done this, but they weren't heading in that direction under the previous manager. We all know that.
Yeah, they weren't. They definitely weren't. Okay. Well, that should be ratified, as we say, in the next 24 to 48 hours. And we cross our fingers that it is done because it just needs sorting out. There was a lot of discussion about handball, funnily enough, in this game. And the Nottingham Forest fans not happy about it. It's either another handball VAR blunder or it is the correct call made by a referee empowered to make his own decision and sticking by it despite the interruption of a VAR. It depends on which way you fall. It has divided opinion. And I've spoken to a few referees today, and some in the referee fraternity think that it was handball and because there is a controlling movement and therefore the goal should have been disallowed. However, lots of them agree with the referee's interpretation. The biggest issue, obviously, is the handball law itself. And when I was speaking to Vitor Pereira, the way I sort of framed it to him is what did you think of it? He said it's been decided by this decision. I don't think it was, because Manchester United had 29 shots on goal and an XG of 4.30. I mean, they absolutely could have finished them off at any time. But it was a big moment in the game because it was immediately after Nottingham Forest had equalised. And I think that took the wind out of their sails. I asked Vitor Pereira whether or not he thought it was handball. He said he thought it did. And then I said to him, okay, so if that was in your box and it was your defender making that motion, would you accept then that you had to have a penalty given against you? And at that point, he kind of wavered and went, I think the handball law needs looking at. And I think that's what we really all agree. I mean, my view, for what it's worth, is that it's accidental. The ref was right to award the goal. First of all, I think the arm is actually moving away. And if you go to later in the day when Thomas Soucek is involved in an incident at Newcastle United, where his arm actually just edges in a similar sort of position towards the ball, I think that was more of a penalty. But if you're not going to give that penalty, you can't really give or chalk off a goal for handball against Brian Mbeumo. There was consistency at least across those two decisions, but there is no consistency because there's so much confusion around the law. I think after he touches it, he shoots, that's blocked, it hits another defender in the face, rebounds to Cunha, who strokes it home. And I think, if it was the next action before a goal or Mbeumo himself scores, then it definitely would have been chalked off because accidental handball by a goal scorer is not allowed. But when it happens 3 or 4 motions before a goal is scored and from a different player, then in the law it says accidental handball will not be punished in this incident. So if the referee is following the law, I think if he believes, which he clearly did because he saw it with his eyes and then watched it on the TV after being asked to go and do a review, that is accidental, he's allowed to give the goal.
Yeah, and actually I think it's quite refreshing when we've been talking about on-field referees shying away from decisions that he got called over to the screen, Michael Salisbury decided, actually, do you know what, my original reading of this situation, I stand by it and I'm going to award the goal. All I would say is you look at the reaction of the United players. Cunha didn't even celebrate. He was convinced it was going to be ruled out. And I guess the fact you've got, as you said, some referees saying, yeah, he's called that correct. Other referees or members of the refereeing fraternity saying, no, it should have been ruled out. There's that grey area where nobody quite knows, I think, what handball is anymore. I was worried as a United fan he was going to rule it out, Michael Salisbury. But as I say, I applaud him for the fact he stood by his on-pitch decision.
I must admit, I think the fact that some say it was handball and some say it wasn't handball suggests to me it's not a clear error. Therefore, the VAR probably shouldn't have got involved in the first place. But if he thought it was a clear error, that's fine. He called the geezer over to the monitor and he said no. The other thing is that a lot of people slagging off VAR. I've seen loads of tweets of people saying, as if it couldn't get any worse, VAR's ruining the game again. Actually, this is not VAR ruining the game. If you believe that decision is wrong, the problem is the ref, not the VAR.
And the
VAR agrees with you that it should be ruled out. So it's got nothing to do with the VAR, it's to do with the ref. If you think that VAR is great, then actually that's an instance of it probably getting it wrong because it thought it was a clear and obvious error and it probably wasn't. So I don't know. I think the key issue is, despite Chris Foy telling me on the Men in Black podcast earlier in the season that we're in a good place with handball continually. I don't think we are in a great place with handball. And the biggest issue over the next few years is going to be untangling that very messy law. Quick one on Bruno Fernandes, because he recorded his 20th assist of the season in the match against Nottingham Forest, equaling the record for the most assists in a Premier League season alongside Thierry Henry and Kevin De Bruyne. And after the game, I spoke to him about a lot of different things, including equaling that record. I'm delighted to say I'm standing next to the man who has 20 Premier League assists this season and now jointly holds the record for Premier League assists in a single campaign. How does it feel to get to that record today?
Obviously, it feels great. Like we're talking about two of the best players that the Premier League has ever seen, and being together with them in this category, not in anything else that they have done, because obviously, as I said, two of the best players that the Premier League has ever seen in the last years, and I'm very happy to be in their company in this assist record. I'm very proud. It's a very proud moment for me because it's not easy. You can find a way of making it easy on the eyes of someone, but it's not easy to get 20 assists, and I'm very proud of that.
Are you a little bit frustrated you didn't break the record today because you created so many opportunities?
No, I'm not. I'm very happy that Brian got back to his goals. That's most important than me breaking the record. And obviously, I wanted to break the record. I wanted to go as much as I can, to not as much for the record, but to serve my teammates, to make them score goals, because this is what my game is about, is giving them the opportunity of scoring goals. And at the end of the day, yes, I can get that accolades and that praise only if they get the ball in the back of the net. I created a lot, but as I've done in many other games, and I think it's one of the probably best qualities I have, and I have to keep doing. It's not something that I do it to get the assist record.
I think you're widely accepted as the best player this club has had since Sir Alex Ferguson left the building. Sometimes you're very passionate, very demonstrative, but that comes, doesn't it, from the place that you want success for this football club. Do you see that coming down the line?
Oh, that comes from Bruno when he was young, when he grew up, when he had that fire on himself to make it into the top level, to be a footballer, to play football for his life, to enjoy, to have a smile in his face playing, sometimes being hungry when he's playing, when things are not getting right, and when he can make it different, trying to solve problems that sometimes work, sometimes doesn't work. But yes, I want the club to succeed. I want the club to be winning trophies, and I've never hid from that I want to win the Premier League, I want to win the Champions League, I want to win the Carabao, the FA Cup, everything that I'm involved with, I want to win it. And I will try always my best to win that and to make the most of it, because I came to the club because I thought there was an opportunity for me to come to a club that will win trophies.
And do you think that is what is in Manchester United's future with Michael Carrick in charge?
That's in the Man United's DNA, not future whatsoever. I know that we haven't won the league for so many years. I think, I don't know, now probably 13, 14 maybe. But we still hold the record of most Premier Leagues together with Liverpool. So our DNA is still here, is still with our fans, and whoever comes to the club has to understand that that's still part of the club. Whether we don't win it for so long or whatsoever, we always have to have it in mind and always go to the games to win it.
What I thought was great is where we discussed his demeanour on pitch, right? Because he gets a lot of stick for that, and I think he answered that brilliantly.
Yeah, he did actually, and he took it back to his childhood and sort of that hunger that's always been in him. I don't think we've had so much of that this year, people berating Bruno Fernandes' behaviour. I did get a message from one of our colleagues after he was visibly upset that Brian Mbeumo skied one over the bar when he could have got the assist record earlier, saying, that's a selfish action. I could understand why he was exasperated, because it was an easy chance from Mbeumo, one of a couple of easy chances that he missed before eventually getting his goal, ironically, from a Fernandes assist. But he's been great. He's won the Player of the Year again, I think 5 times now. He's been crowned Supporters Player of the Year. That tells you how important he's been. You referenced it to him that he was the best signing post Sir Alex Ferguson. I totally agree with that. I thought he was quite humble in the way that he wouldn't compare himself to Henry and Kevin De Bruyne, and sort of said, they're greats to the game. I'm almost privileged to be in that company, and maybe that's a humble side that a lot of people don't see from Bruno Fernandes. He could have had 3 or 4 assists in this game. You know, I mentioned Mbumo's misses. Joshua Zirkzee, come on. And I mean, if anyone's in any doubt that he doesn't really have a future at the football club, just watch that 20-minute cameo, because Bruno's laid a couple on a plate for him as well. And, you know, I don't want to be too cruel, but he looked like he won a raffle to be there, Joshua Zirkzee.
I got told off by Steve Bruce, didn't I, during the commentary, because I said at one stage he receives the ball in the penalty area and it took him so long to turn and get his shot away. I said, he's got the turning circle of an articulated lorry. And Steve Bruce said, now, Sam, that's not like you. And he's right. I don't usually say things like that, and I probably shouldn't have done, but I was getting so frustrated.
Yeah, well, I'm playing there on Thursday. If I
you'll make him look great.
if I get an opportunity half as good as some of those that he got, I'm scoring at the Stretford end, I tell you.
By the way, just to let you know, right, I completely am with Bruno. You throw your arms up as much as you like. I played with Crookie at Tottenham Hotspur last week, and I still haven't forgiven him for not squaring me the ball when I was free at the back post instead of taking on the glory shot. It really irritated me. And actually, there is a photo doing the rounds of me standing there going, "What are you doing?" Like that with my arms aloft. Very Bruno from me. Right, okay, let's move on to Liverpool. Mo Salah has chucked Arne Slot under so many buses that Stagecoach are actually launching a new route through Anfield. The Liverpool talisman, Salah, is going to play his last game for the club on Sunday, apparently, when the team take on Brentford at Anfield. It's very difficult, though, isn't it, for him to play or not to play? I don't know what you do if you're Arne Slot, because if you don't play him, you're basically denying a legend a big goodbye, and therefore undermining your relationship with the supporters even further. Yeah. If you do play him, he's undermined your authority and you're giving in to him. So it's a very difficult situation for Arne Slot to manage. He's certainly not going quietly. Do you think that he has done himself an injustice by leaving in this manner?
Yeah, I do. And actually, I saw a tweet from a journalistic colleague of ours saying, if you're going to leave a football club, do it like Andy Robertson, don't do it like Mo Salah. And I get where he's coming from. You know, I thought the timing of the statement halfway through the FA Cup final, less than 24 hours after a heavy defeat at Aston Villa, was poor. And I think the sentiment of the statement is poor. You know, it's not a thinly veiled swipe at his manager. It's a public condemnation. The fact he's used the phrase rock and roll football, you know, that
heavy metal attacking team that opponents fear, and getting back to a team that wins trophy. It's been very painful, not what our fans deserve.
Yeah, I mean, that's a clear reference to Jurgen Klopp, and, you know, a clear attempt to undermine Arne Slot and to further fracture what is already a very frosty relationship with the Liverpool supporters. But you're right, if he doesn't play him, and I wouldn't, you know, if I was a manager, I wouldn't want to see him again. But if he doesn't play him and give him that Anfield farewell, any fans that are still with Arne Slot are very quickly going to join those dissenting voices. So I don't envy the position that Mo Salah has put him in. But I think there's also a lack of awareness from Mo Salah. You look at the drop-off in his standards individually from last season to this. He has been as big a factor, if not the biggest factor, in Liverpool's decline and their pitiful defence of the title. But this is a guy who clearly doesn't have any self-awareness. You know, he kicked off when Arne Slot, rightly, in my opinion, took him out of the team because he wasn't performing earlier in the season. And I think the Liverpool hierarchy will hold their nerve. I think they'll see this for what it is, probably not even written by Mo Salah, probably written by his agent on Salah's behalf. And they'll see it as a sort of vicious parting swipe at the manager. And I actually think Arne Slot will keep his dignity. He'll bat the questions away in his press conference, and he will give Mo Salah that farewell that probably, with what he's done to the manager, he doesn't deserve.
I wonder what Arne Slot's standing is in the Liverpool dressing room, because looking at the responses to Mo Salah's tirade, let's call it that, on Instagram, he seems to have a bit of support in the dressing room.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the people that liked it, commented on it. You know, it doesn't bode well, does it, going forward for Arne Slot? It's almost as if the whole playing staff has got together and decided, hold on a second, we need to put pressure on the hierarchy to get rid of this fella. The fact that they were holding firm and saying they weren't going to do that And now it feels like there is a tidal wave of pressure being applied by the playing staff. It sort of leads Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes with no choice, really, to make a change. I don't think it's been made that much of because Salah is Salah and Curtis Jones is Curtis Jones. But Curtis Jones also released a statement, didn't he, straight afterwards?
Yeah, but he's another player I think who'll be leaving the club at the end of the season. I think actually he still feels a bit sore that he wasn't allowed to go over to Inter Milan in January when they were sniffing around. But you're right that the volume of players, new and old, actually, people like Milos Kerkez, who've not been at the football club very long, likes the post, and it is a problem, I think, for Arne Slot and the Liverpool hierarchy. As I say, they've always been steadfast throughout the season. They want this manager to stay. They believe in him. The analytics that got him the job in the first place and led them to that Premier League title last season still hold firm. But certainly when it comes to supporters and seemingly, as you say, a big contingent in that dressing room, he isn't Mr. Popular, is he? So it's going to be fascinating to see how this plays out.
I don't want to remove anybody from a job, but it does seem to me as if it's a little bit of an untenable situation if the fan base largely wants you removed and the playing staff feel the same way. That is a problem, I think, that is going to be very difficult for him to turn around. Now, my dealings with Arne Slot are cordial. I think he's very polite. I think the way he analyses football when he talks about it is really quite impressive. He's very calm. He never seems to lose his temper. But a bit like, and I just, look, I'm not giving away any secrets here. Jurgen Klopp would put on this little veneer when he came in front of the cameras or the microphone was on. He was very sort of ebullient and happy and have a joke and ha, 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 ha. It was all that. When that microphone went off and when that camera went off, he was a different guy. I know that's what the public see, but being around it, that he was a bit different to that, right? I don't think everybody thinks he walks around like that all the time, laughing like Eddie Murphy. The fact is that Arne Slot comes across to me when I see him as quite a polite individual, quite composed. I'm not necessarily sure, again, that that's always the case when he's in the dressing room, because I don't know, I've never experienced that, but I've never seen that change. Whereas with Klopp, I did sort of see the change briefly. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you experienced that. He just comes across well to me, Arne Slot.
Yeah, and he's been described to me by people who know him well as, fundamentally a decent and nice human being. So it's strange how quickly this is all unravelled. I do think there's still a lot of emotions in that Liverpool dressing room because of what happened in the summer and the tragic passing of Diogo Jota. A couple of Liverpool fans have actually come for me on social media for sort of, in their eyes, using his death as an excuse. But it is a factor, in what's happened this season. You can't take away from that. The people who played with him and loved him have been badly affected. The new players, and there were a lot of them coming into the dressing room, probably didn't know how to handle themselves in that situation because it's such a unique environment they're walking into. So then you factor in the injuries to key players. Alexander Isak in particular has had no season at all. Their record signing because of injury, Florian Wirtz, I think has taken a bit of time to adapt. Kerkez has been really disappointing, which has surprised me because he looks a really good player at Bournemouth. So Ekitike, probably the one shining light of their summer signings, has picked up an injury that is going to rule him out for the summer and a large chunk of next season as well. I think it's not an injury that you recover from quickly. So everything that could go against Liverpool has gone against them, but certainly the tide of public opinion is very much against the manager.
And the football's been crap. And that ultimately is the biggest problem. And that's why the tide of public opinion has turned against him, because it's been so dull to watch and they haven't enjoyed it. And when you don't enjoy what you're going to watch and you're paying big prices and you're traveling all over Europe watching your team and they're not winning, that's a big problem. Similar sort of feeling must be being felt by the West Ham fans. Newcastle beat them 3-1 on Sunday afternoon. The London Stadium has hosted athletics, the Olympics, concerts, great ones. It's scheduled to host Take That's new tour. I think it's called The Circus Apt. And Premier League football have been there. Major League Baseball, the Mets have played there. We've even seen some other big sporting events. The World Athletic Championships, I think we've seen that. So baseball, maybe some karting or some sort of Formula E has been there too. I'm not entirely sure. But it's about to add championship football to its CV. West Ham are going down. Spurs need just 1 point to survive courtesy of the fact that they've got an unbridgeable goal difference. If they draw with Chelsea at Stamford Bridge on Tuesday night, they will be safe and West Ham will be relegated. Not officially, but they will be. They'll be relegated. They are going down. A catalogue of errors on display at St James's Park. It was a terrible, terrible start to the game. Within 20 minutes, they were beaten. West Ham did not turn up. A lack of intensity. Jean-Claire Todibo, I remember sitting with you and Martin O'Neill in a studio earlier in the season, and he was going ballistic about this player. He was going absolutely crazy, calling him out. This is back in September. And where's the urgency? You're going to go down. You're getting relegated, mate. You know, you've got to go out and you've got to engage with the play. It's an awful, awful, awful start to the match. They score a belter towards the end of the game. They have chances later in the match, but they're 3-0 down by this point. Come on. You're getting relegated. I mean, it was a pathetic performance. Now, some people suggesting that actually what happened is that they were hamstrung, hampered, felt the weight on their shoulders because of what happened last week at the London Stadium. Shake it off. Shake it off. You had the chance to dump Tottenham into the relegation zone before they go to Chelsea. Think of the psychological pressure that Tottenham would have felt going into that game if they were in the relegation zone. You've basically handed them safety on their play. I thought it was a terrible performance. Actually, he got his team selection wrong, which he had to admit after 20 minutes by making a substitution. Awful day for West Ham.
Yeah, and you took the words out of my mouth. You know, we started this review pod talking about Pep Guardiola and how he got his team wrong at Wembley but got away with it. Nuno Espirito Santo got his team wrong at Newcastle and certainly didn't get away with it. You know, it sends out the wrong message completely when you're in desperate need of points and you go away from home against a team who themselves are feeling pressure from the crowd because they're not winning many games. And you've set up with a back three, presumably to try and stay in the game as long as you can. Well, that obviously didn't last very long. I thought actually wrong game probably for Callum Wilson. I sort of get it. It's against his old club. He might have thought, you know, that might just get him a goal or two. But Castellanos has been one of the key reasons they've given themselves a fighting chance, not necessarily because he's going to score bags of goals, but, you know, he is a leader. I think he's proven that since he came in. So not for the first time, Nuno got it wrong. And I do wonder, you know, I know the noises coming out are that even if they go down, they'll stick with him. I don't know if he's done enough. You know, you look at those selections that you keep talking about in the first couple of games. Was it Brentford and Leeds?
And Leeds. They go home to Brentford on a Monday night. He plays a young kid out of position. It's after an international break. And the sort of suggestion is that he's working with the players that he had during the international break. They played on a Monday, so they had the whole of the weekend. Unlike some other teams who played Friday, Saturday, Sunday, he had an extra day, if not two, to work with the players that came back from international duty. They lost that game pathetically against Brentford. They could have been beat 6-0. It was only 2, I think, in the end. It could have been 3. I can't remember now. But it could have been 6 easily. They then go to Leeds 4 days later. Again, he plays a completely brainless team. He has to make a change after 25 minutes because literally it's all completely gone wrong. They're 2-0 down. Crazy. That's 3 points thrown away twice, 6 points thrown away in 4 days. And then on the biggest afternoon probably of their season, he makes another crazy team selection. I'm surprised. I'm really surprised. Really surprised.
Yeah. And as I say, you know, I think he's had more than enough time to turn it around. Tottenham have done their best to oblige. You know, if they're going to stay up, having gone how many games without a win since the turn of the year, then, you know, that
they won't have to win at home now. They won't have to win at home in 2026, Tottenham, and still stay up.
Yeah,
because they just need a point at Chelsea.
And that is pretty damning on Nuno Espirito Santo and West Ham. It's hard to have too much sympathy for the club. You always feel for the supporters in this situation, but they've made a lot of bad decisions that have led to this downward spiral. They didn't capitalise when they won that European trophy under David Moyes. They stuck with Graham Potter for too long. They appointed the wrong man before him in Lopetegui. That was never the right fit. Their recruitment has been poor. They didn't suitably replace Mohamed Kudus. And you fear for the football club because financially this is going to be a massive issue. Somerville will go. He's been one of the few players who actually has turned up during this relegation run.
Bowen will have to go, Crook.
Jared Bowen will get a move. But, you know, I don't think he's been great in recent weeks. You know, when you need your main man to be the leader, the captain, I'm not sure he's delivered, but he'll go as well. Mavropanos might have done enough to get himself a move. Not sure they want him in the Championship anyway. Thomas Souček, wouldn't surprise me if he reunites with David Moyes at Everton now. So it's going to be a massive summer of upheaval. And financially, I think they've got problems.
Yes. OK, let's quickly go through some of the fixtures that are happening midweek. Arsenal versus Burnley. Arsenal need to win 2 games to win the title. If they don't beat Burnley, they don't deserve to win the title. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
Bournemouth take on Manchester City Tuesday, 7:30. You're going to this one. You're telling everybody who will listen that Bournemouth are going to get something from this game. You think they might even beat Manchester City. Is that true?
Yeah, and do you know what? My belief was only strengthened, speaking of Pep after the game at Wembley. And it felt to me like he was getting his excuses in early, because I think he said, a trip to Bournemouth is like a trip to the dentist. You don't really want to do it. And he said to me that they've had a full 7 days to prepare. We've got 3. So, yeah, I don't think City will win at Bournemouth. I think if Arsenal beat Burnley and beat them well the night before, psychologically, City will know that their title race is won. And if Bournemouth do win, there's still a big chance they end up in the Champions League next season. That will take them to 58 points. That will mean they're guaranteed to finish at least 6th. I think Liverpool probably will summon enough to beat Brentford. A Brentford team who've won 1 in 10 on the last day of the season. And if it is to be Pep Guardiola's last game, City will beat Villa. So therefore, we're going to get that scenario where Villa, hopefully, are Europa League winners. They finish 5th, and then Bournemouth and their tiny little stadium end up in the Champions League.
Well, their tiny little stadium will not end up in the Champions League, I don't think, but I get where you're coming from. I think they'll have to play elsewhere, although I don't know where that will be. Maybe it will be at Brighton, where they've sort of almost thrown away the chance to finish in the Champions League by not winning on Sunday. They lost to Leeds United with a last minute, about a 99th minute goal from Dominic Calvert-Lewin. So they've only got 53 points from their 37 games and going to their final game of the season, almost needing a little bit of a miracle because they need Bournemouth to drop points twice. Bournemouth at home to Manchester City and then away at Nottingham Forest, which is, if you're not being funny, Nottingham Forest got nothing to play for, and Bournemouth trying to get in the Champions League, there's every chance that Bournemouth are going to win that game. So, I think probably for Brighton, the idea of getting into the top competition is done. Chelsea-Tottenham, that's going to end in a draw now. I'm calling it now. It's going to end in a draw. Tottenham are going to be safe. I mean, Chelsea will want to beat them, but I don't know. I don't trust. Do you trust Chelsea to beat Tottenham? Really? I mean, if Gusto's injured, I don't think he'll play again this season. Doesn't look like it. I mean, he could hardly walk by the end of the game. João Pedro had to come off because he had a problem. And it's 3 days after the cup final. I just can't see it. Tottenham have been well lucky, haven't they, really, that West Ham have faltered so badly and that the fixtures have fallen nicely for them. With Leeds just after Leeds have been safe, Chelsea just after the cup final. I think they'll be fine now, Tottenham. And actually, do you know what? I said this to someone earlier on. I want Tottenham to be in the Premier League. I do, because it's a massive stadium. I didn't think they would go down. I didn't think there was any chance that they'd go down. But I am disappointed for West Ham and their supporters, because having spent so much time with them over the course of the last few years, that Europa Conference League final was epic. Just feel like it's a missed opportunity. But then again, both clubs have been run badly over the last couple of years. Anyway, that's it from us. We'll be back on Thursday morning, to review the Europa League final, which hopefully Aston Villa win. Good luck to them. Xabi Alonso very, very excited. He's in the Algarve this weekend. He's flying straight to Istanbul for a bit more fun. He'll be on all week, I'm sure, telling us how great Aston Villa are going to be, and we hope that they are. So good luck to them. They're playing Freiburg, who I think they should beat. I did see Freiburg a couple of times this year. In fact, recently they played in the semi-final. I did both those games, and I think defensively they'll probably get the better of them, Aston Villa, especially if they play like they did on Friday night. And then we'll also look forward to the final weekend of action in the Premier League and the Championship playoff final as well, which may or may not be Hull against Southampton. Good night.